Stephen, can you come in? No. Okay. So, so that will bring us to reports and updates. For this meeting, we've collapsed the annual meeting, which was originally to be on Thursday, in this meeting to have them in one meeting. So we will have now the annual report of the administrators.
I'll have Julie start. As you know, the administrators, we work through our goals every year and plan our retreat. We're gonna do those goals. And in the past,
Three, which are still within.
But we made a change in using the AOS goals, and I'll let Julie will talk a little bit about that before I review where we are.
Just short and sweet here. The high school is going through its 10-year, it's a little late because of COVID accreditation process. We are longstanding participants in NEASC, which is New England Association of Secondary Schools and Colleges. And they have a series of criteria that is considered best practice. And then we go through a self-study to see how we're measuring up with that and set goals and so forth. And we get evaluated and we get accredited or not accredited. And so that process has begun at the high school this year. It made a lot of sense to say, well, they've changed their criteria and let's switch up our pots a little bit from being the three kind of traditional ones that we had, which sort of, and just line them up with the NEASC goals, which are these three headers here on the report. So that's the only change we made really, but all of the content has just been redistributed under those categories.
So it makes alignment as the high school plans, and we plan, with all of this all along, so you're not trying to change buckets as you sort of move along and have those conversations. I think.
I also want to talk about next month what we're going to talk about with NEASC and Senior X, and I couldn't remember if you also want.
We're going to do that next month.
Yeah. Okay. No. I just know it's coming.
Yeah. So goal one was strengthening learning culture, and looking back, making sure that we provided resources and support for teachers to refine lessons and practices as it relates to anti-bias and anti-racism, teaching and looking at social emotional learning, mental health, and trauma-informed practices as we moved into next year and supporting our service promise, which is working to interrupt educational inequities so that each child will thrive one conversation at a time. Continuing that work in anti-racism lessons and practices and strengthening our social emotional learning through advisories, restorative practices at the middle and the high schools. Goal two, improving student learning. Last year, and looking back, we were focusing on creating the high impact teaching strategies, using tech to support high impact teaching, getting our focus and understanding of the science of reading, supporting civil discourse program in all 6 through 11 social studies classrooms, which is we practiced that in October at the administrative team and got a real understanding of that work. And as you know, Keaton here at the high school was named Teacher of the Year under our touchstones. Looking ahead, review the newly updated middle school and high school main ELA and math standards, revise the curriculum as needed. We are researching getting a chapter of the Educators Rising chapter. We talked a little bit about that last month, about growing your own teachers with a recognition that the majority of your teachers are coming from your community. And as we take a look at our community as growing more diverse, and hopefully seeing that represented here, and trying to get our students interested in the teaching profession seems to be one of the better ways of drawing people into our works. And continuing our focus on the science of reading. And the goal area of support for professional practice, working on creating an inclusive school climate, and developing leadership pathways for ed techs and for teachers. That kind of rolled into this year and some of our work with our common studies and refining our performance evaluation and professional growth. But we formed a steering committee, aligning student and parent surveys with our new frameworks and piloting the documents that we're using with our new professional evaluation and growth process. And goal 4, which is constructing learning supports. We have explored the feasibility of pre-K at some of our schools, and I'll share a little something when we do next year. We implemented pre-K for Southwest Harbor and Tremont together, offered a summer program last year for the AOS as a whole, offered combined ESY, and continue to strengthen our academic and behavior, the multi-tiered system of supports, which is replacing RTI. That involves not only academics, but also looking at behavior. Looking forward, that pre-K program has started at Mount Desert, and in Tremont, they received a DOE grant for expanded pre-K. So they are going to be expanding pre-K in their schools, and Chandra will be working with the state on finalizing that grant and the monies that will be used to starting a pre-K at their school. Continuing to support and grow our summer school as a district-wide experience, and strengthening our academic and behavioral SEL and NPSS. As you know, we hired someone through the Great School Partnerships who is helping our leaders in each of our schools developing plans and working with their staff as a way of meeting students' needs in their particular schools. And then goal 5 was ensuring the learning resources and just continuing to explore options for contracting with external human resources providers. That's one of my conversations with area superintendents. And when I go down in January with my superintendent group to talk about that experience, because it weighs heavy on principals and our office here in terms of some of those needs. Continue to work with school boards to reconstruct and plan what our RSU structure may look like around what we have for our community, what the buildings we have, and what will meet our needs. So working on that. Continue to manage COVID relief funds, and it looks like we're going to just continue to host, some job fairs every now and again. I was in my report. I'll skip over it. We had the job fair here. We had 7 folks come, got some subs out of it, and techs, and so it was a great experience. And I thought the more opportunities that we could do that would be really helpful. So even if we bring in 7 people, that's 7 people we didn't have. So I thought that was really well. And so that's our annual report, and we could do more in depth since it was in more guidance. But if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Question?
I guess just a quick follow-up. Did you say you were going to go over the job fair later in your report as well, or?
Well, I did just now, just to talk about the
Just
that
throw
we
it out
had
there.
the 7
Okay.
people. It was in my superintendent's report. But
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we will move on to the superintendent report.
So enrollments, pre-K 8, there are 923 students. And at the high school, there's 497 with a total of 1420, which is -7 from the last time. As you know, it was +6, and it ebbs and flows throughout the year. At the last meeting, Jamie had asked about, I have reviewed superintendent's agreements, and there was a question about how many within those are have IEPs or 504s. So in the total of the 60 that are throughout the district, 11 students have IEPs and 4 have 504s of that 60 in terms of those students that have superintendent agreements. And so our first potential snowfall event will be Tuesday night. So just so you all know, that's coming. It says 1 to 3 inches right now. But I get these lovely little updates every now and again that come across. So just so you know, I'll be gearing up. Under school highlights, Tremont expanded their pre-K grant, being able to expand their program. So that's really exciting. And then concerts are happening. But as you know, the numbers of absences are increasing in some schools, not at all, some schools a lot. I'll talk a little bit about that. And so if those get shifted because there's not enough kids to participate, don't be surprised. But hopefully we'll be able to get through those before we hit the holidays, because what a great experience in the last couple of years, not having to have those experiences. So looking forward to those. And then I was going to give an update on revisions around communication and the lockdown. And so you folks know, since our last meeting, I had met with Melissa Condon at the state level, and then also with the events statewide 2 weeks ago with the schools having those hoaxes. All superintendents met last week for just a revision of their experience. One of the biggest things that came out of that was communication is extremely important. Though a lot of them got messages out to their communities within between 20 and 35 minutes of the schools that sort of shared their experience. There is a recognition that with the social media, the way that it is, that you got to get it out in 10 minutes. That could be, and they all recognize that could be really hard depending on the situation. But it was a real recognition that Sanford had all kinds of stuff going out everywhere, and that was troubling to that community. And at MSA D11, as well, and just the importance of being able to meet that need and get information out as quickly as possible. Huge piece. And today I met with Maya Keynes, who is Bar Harbor's communication coordinator. It's a new hire. We spent a lot of time talking about social media and being able to utilize her position in terms of support, in terms of being able to get information out. So that was great. What I've been doing since then is in terms of working with the principals, as we get back to all other aspects of our plan, the one piece I wanted to focus on was communication, particularly in the three biggest areas where we would need to get information out quickly to parents. And that is through when we do a shelter in place or a lockdown or an evacuation. If you call shelter in place, might be there might be something going on in the community. Years ago in Bar Harbor, there was a robbery at the Walmart, so the police asked us to shelter in place. And so there's information that you want to be able to share when you're asked, which just means you lock all the exterior doors, pull your stage. You can continue to do what you need to do unless the situation changes within the building, but no one's allowed to sort of be. In a place like Trenton, it might be that there's a gas leak at the airport or at the bus station, or there's a truck that went by because that's the only corridor that carries some funky gas or chemical for the lab, and they have to pull it down. So then it's a ventilation issue. And so shelter in place deals with some of those pieces. And then lockdown and evacuation would be for fire, or something happens in a certain wing with a boiler explosion, you have to leave the building. And so what I wanted to make sure that was in our plan was an identification of who the key stakeholders are. And those would be, your primary, secondary, and other like main DOE. But how important it is when you have a situation to make sure you get information out to those people. So those are listed. And I've added board members to Power School. So if the principal is going through an event and they're using School Messenger, they can click on their school or as a whole, the AOS to get messages out. So in our situation, you're not only using these multiple types of media to get information out, but if you can narrow that down for those important primary members, then you can do that through School Messenger. And so we're working on that for primary members. Yeah. The primary members are student, staff, and other on-site, and particularly bus drivers, could be district staff, and others who might support efforts to resolve a particular situation, parents and guardians, and board members, as well. Those would be your primary members. Secondary would be media, which could be done through the liaison, and some of my conversations with Maya would be, she could be that contact person, and would be in that sort of initial list. could be other district staff, neighboring schools, and local leaders. And then talking to Maya, I'd probably put some of our local leaders within and my access and everybody else's for school messenger. And then other was, you know, the end of those, you contacted you and talk with them. The important communication channels.
And just on that primary list, how about a contact for the teachers, with their spouse or, I know I've heard some people saying that that was concerning to them, that their spouses and their childcare people didn't know when they would be.
When they'll be released. And that's something that's in my notes to try to figure out where you can grab that information so it's available. Because spouses aren't in our information system for our school. It's just the individual teacher. And so whether or not those are fields that we can create or something, I'll have to take a look at, because we don't have a list of where spouses of staff members. Oh, yes.
At the high school, Mary Carl is working to gather information and she'll be working with approaching Elaine and see if they can. But you can go through these.
One of the things that I'll be looking into, again, that came up with the superintendent, is each one of those schools use a communication tool called RealShare, which is from a company, APG, I think. Yeah, I had to ask, what? RealShare. So it is a large messaging system through APG, which is a company that does websites and other pieces. But every one of those schools, that was the tool that they use, which I haven't used before. And some of our, in the past, we looked at different systems other than School Messenger. Right Arrow was something that came up, but I never heard of RealShare. But it was interesting that all of them use that. So I got Josh to take a look at what that system is, and I'm curious why they all gravitate toward that. Ian, thank you for that. Mary was doing that work with Elaine. In terms of identifying communication channels, School Messenger, of course, or whatever our tool is, the district and school website, which probably wasn't utilized as well as it could, in making sure that folks who are identified as the communicators are able to hop on a website and put a quick message so that it's a place where people can go. Phone messages, one of the biggest concerns was for staff here at the high school was the ringing of the phone, and that they couldn't hit a button that then would at least give a message to parents to say, please check your text messages or the school website or whatever. So that's something that we're going to work on to make sure that that's something that can be programmed into all the schools. So if there is a lockdown, you can hit that button. So when the phone rings, at least there's an answer and it can direct people to a place to go. Social media is, is hugely important. And Jamie and I talked about the importance of that and being able to monitor. One of the things that Maya came as part of her role to be able to do and help people who are in crisis make decisions. And so right now we don't have, as like an AOS, don't have a Facebook presence, and probably important to have something like that. But just figuring out which staff, what can we put on there? It would be forward facing, but then it could be a tool to use that people would go to, even if for now it just shows meetings and little tidbits like that. But a lot of our schools have some kind of social media facing page, and that's a really important and useful tool to have.
Like an Instagram. Yep.
I
Yes.
noticed with the recent name Maritime Pride and their thing, utilize
They
their
utilize their-
social media to communicate. That's the one thing.
Any family, whatever about what's happening.
And then one of the other pieces is the local media, particularly for us, the places where people pay most attention, and that would be the Islander and of course Chris, Popper's page, and Maya, lent herself as to be that person, to be able to be the person to then take whatever information comes from the liaison to those folks and be that intermediary, and she has the tools and the resources to be able to do that. So, that's great to have within our area. And then the addendum that I'll be adding is just, steps to communication, reviewing that, and then a series of messages, templates that are all ready to be able to use. And so one of the things I'm going to do with Messenger right now as our system, to put them in there, is have staff take what I've already written as templates and put those in School Messenger and make sure that they're accessible to all of the principals who would be that acting liaisons, to be able to go in and be able to have that really quickly and just plug in the information where needed. So I have those for both, a website, an email, and then the text message. Our text messages only allows for 160 characters. So basically all you can say is, please check your email or the school website. But even that would be important, but that's, in the list of things that I created. And then, so there's those for each of those areas. And then in terms of the incident command, one of the big pieces was, if I'm out of the picture, who's gonna sort of be able to take care of the public information? Because usually within the incident command, as shared through the state folks, the principal is the incident commander. And then at that point, the public information officer would be the superintendent. And then reworking that, one of the big things was, if I'm unable to do it because the issue is I have to help the incident commander, because I have to become that because that individual is too close to the situation. We have put in that Rhonda would be that person. And then again, if the issue is happening here at the high school, and the lockdown is sufficient that even that office is unable to do work, then I've talked with Crystal DeGrassa being the potential, being that person to be the liaison, to be able to continue that work. And then of course the Bar Harbor communication coordinator, she said she would like, be and is willing to be part of anything that happens with any of our schools. So I think that was sort of a really important piece, and it's awesome that Bar Harbor has that position. And so those are the pieces in terms of the communication that I wanted to make sure that I shared with you. Probably in January, I'll sit, we'll take one of our 18 meetings to really sort of take a look and implement some of these things. I'm going to get the templates into our school messenger as soon as possible so that those things are available for staff. But that's sort of the work that I've been doing in that area. And then some of the there's other pieces around unification that we talked about as an 18, and how quickly you could turn students around. And just in my communications with the state, the recommendation is, as soon as you have students on site and those parents there, to be unified with their parents, and you do that right away. We have been told in the past to usually wait, collect everybody, but they say to keep the process moving. Part of that is dealing with space, and that we learned, MTBS is a tight little narrow area, and collecting that many people all at once is really difficult. And all of our schools have different situations, so that's like one of the pieces around the unification that will be different from our conversations. So that's just some of the information I wanted to make sure I shared back with you all afterwards.
Yeah.
Mindful of the fact that you don't talk publicly about the actual disaster response document. Do you envision an opportunity when this is done to have a simplified, useful document? I don't know whether it would be a policy or whether it would be a descriptor available to the community and available to parents to say, these are the different types of events that might disrupt the school day. These are the common situations that will occur. This is where you should go to get information about this. Just like, just as simplified, but
Like the condensed version of what you just told us.
yeah,
Pretty much what the piece that I have been working on basically breaks those down.
yeah.
I'll probably break down a little bit further, just describing what those incidents are. I do have that listed for the big three, and Melissa convent at the state is going to share a model with me, and that was one of the things that, she talked about, to be able to put that out there so people know what those things are, what might be the possible reason for going there, and then identifying the communication channels. And so they know where to go.
How will you share that with parents?
It will go in, probably in everybody's handbook and go out, that way, and be posted on our website at the AOS level. And probably would be a good idea for it to be posted on the each individual school site. But Melissa and she was going to share some models and we're going to talk about what that looks like. The new Instagram.
I mean, I think you are already doing this, but just like, I think there probably should be like a really proactive publicizing of it.
Of it,
Does that make sense? Not just
Yeah.
posting it. Because I think.
Yeah.
It not really looks like the school website, sadly. It's been a great website, but I think it's gonna be like, I don't know, an address.
Like in a newsletter.
Like it's-
Yeah, maybe, right.
What's the perfect response in that situation, though? If there's something happening at school and a parent calls to find out about their student and they get a recording, that sometimes it doesn't always calm their nerves. I guess if it's an updated, go to Instagram right now for a current update or whatever, because a recording ain't gonna necessarily calm anyone's.
Well, hopefully, my hope is that it points them in the direction where the information will be flowing. Because at the school, if there's an event happening, the human's not going to be able to answer the phone. But if it's unless it's like for a lockdown, yes, but if it's a shelter in place, then you'll have a human and they'll be able to say, oh, this is what's happening. And we were asked to be in shelter in place because another thing that happened at Trenton is there was somebody in the woods that the police were looking for. So you can just say that police asked us to lock down and everything is safe for them. And as soon as we're told otherwise, we will get back to normal operations. So depending on the event, it might be
Well, in those situations, perfect in this
Yeah.
situation, you just try to do the best you can.
Marie,
I'm just backing up a little bit too. This is so great. Thank you for the update, first of all. And that's really thorough. And I think we all knew that you're working on those things, for the most part. So the only other thing I'm just wondering about is we haven't had a communication about this November 1st since I think the last communication was about the day that we had the break day, the next day, we stayed home. I'm just wondering how we would love it if everybody in the AOS were watching the AOS meeting right now, listening to your update. But in light of that probably not happening, I just wonder if it makes sense for there to be some sort of doesn't have to be this, the long report you gave, but just an update about where we were and what's happened since. And some of those things are public if you follow along in the meetings. And then where we're going. Just a way to reach out to parents to say, basically, we know we haven't talked to you about this incident for about a month and a half, but we want to acknowledge that there's been some action and closure about that incident. This is what we can tell you, this is what we can't. And these are the things we've been working on the past 6 weeks, and these are the things we hope to bring to fruition in some form in the season to come. I think that would be useful in a way to just connect with parents individually
and a chance to share that new document.
and put your little spreadsheet in it. But yeah, I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
Tammy?
I just want to agree with her because that was one of the things that, not just in our school, our own school, but then we had all the hoaxes and, things going around the country. And I think as parents need that reassurance that yes, even though we're not talking about it, we have to really thoughtfully, carefully going through. And this is, some steps that we can tell you that we've done, and especially with the communication, that was the biggest thing. And being made aware, you're telling people, well, we can only let you be aware of so much of what's going on, but making those steps of informing them what we can tell them, and also in the future there will be links for people to go to as a central place for updates, and instead of having 5 parents call you and like, where's my kid, are they ever coming home? And but I imagine that is a very, it's a scary fear when you look at the world. We were lucky Planning ahead.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions?
Just wanted to apologize if I should have spoke about or asked about it at the high school, but are we seeing an issue with cell phone use since the incident? Since the lockdown? I suspect, I mean, I know my instructions, my kids like, keep it on you, make sure I get an update if I need to, you know, just that assurance that and security that there's something frame when it seems that you need that connection. Are we seeing a little bit more of an uptick of cell phone use?
That's it's really,
Not I'm sure the question, what we've had, heard from students is a request to take their cell phones out of the room when they go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Out of fear of something happening and being out of contact with people and so on. At this time, I told teachers to allow that. With the idea they still can't use it like in the hallway. On the way, and that has uptake. I've had to speak to some students about providing not using the hallway. The other thing we've identified is some research on our part and then education of teaching staff on during a lockdown. And hopefully Eric will go through that again, but what would be the when would it be proper to use a cell phone? And you know, there's a difference between contacting parents, guardians, family at some point in time, you know, versus some misuse of the cell phone during the lockdown itself. So that I think is best tackled through education. That part. Is that what you meant? Is that?
Yeah, that is the question.
Yeah.
that was one of the things Melissa talked about, that, you know, you can say, don't use a cell phone, but then it's her experience across the, you know, better to educate kids on how best to use it. give them a-
tool.
Yeah, as a tool rather than.
Okay, proceed ahead.
So as you know, there's been an uptick in sickness. The county as a whole has COVID is low, so that's not the issue that's been going around. We've had high levels of absences, staff and students with other respiratory illnesses like RSV, influenza A and B, and some gastrointestinal things that are going around. Conroe Emerson was closed today because they had reached a point where there were about a third of students and a third of, or close to a third of staff out, and that's becoming unsafe. And community, basically what schools are to do is once they hit the 15% either in students or staff, they have to go into a portal called NEO and put in the information of how many kids are out. Then we get a call from our local epidemiologist that sort of talks through things that you could do to, you know, make sure you're washing. I mean, they're basically the things that we did through COVID to try to maintain clean air all around us. But not necessarily say, oh, you need to close school. One of the things that they did share was, in terms of breaking the cycle of like an influenza, you need at least 3 days. And so, as we learned from, I know Bucksport did that, closing on Friday, and we did it closing Conroe Emerson, because that was the one school with those numbers that it was going to be unsafe for today, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Today at the high school, they're around 29.6% students out. They had just 12 staff members out. Mount Desert had about 23% of their students out, 11% of staff. Trenton's normal, because I met with the nurses today to sort of talk about, how they're doing. Tremont had just 9 students out and 2 staff. Pematic had 30 students out and 10 staff. The islands, the Cranberries and Frenchboro kind of went through their wave about a week and a half ago. Swans was doing okay. They had normal, I think they had 6 students out, 2 for sick, but they had other staff. And so it's really just taking, from my perspective, it's being able to whether or not it's safe enough to, make sure you can teach in the school regardless of the number of kids that are there. And that's, the most important thing that I will do my best to keep an eye on. And that 3-day thing is there, you know, as an option, because if you will close for 1 day, that's not gonna do anything. So if you were to do it, you would have to do it for the 3 days if you were to see an impact on, you know, so. And speaking with the nurses, the 2 nurses that have sort of been through the waves said, don't make any big moves like in the middle of a week, pay attention to where you are on that wave, because you might be cresting and you'll see a difference when you come back. We might see that, we might not. When I speak to principals tomorrow, for us, particularly non-desert and Pematic, and then we'll see, you know, about the high schools and where we are. Those are the 3 schools that you know, I'm most concerned about, but we'll see where we are. I'll be sending a note out about the staff, just about, you know, wearing a mask if they choose, that might help them keep from getting sick as things are going around. And then I'll take some information that the DOA sent and do that to parents as well, because it's kind of happening everywhere. And I had it myself last week, and it was worse than COVID.
For you.
For me, it was. Just an update, I had my monthly meeting with the NDIEA. We began talking about the groundwork for negotiations to start in the spring. Talked about the parent-teacher conference survey that I will be putting out, and talking about the spring conference and preferences for parents and for teachers is what they're feeling. And then we talked a bit about the calendar, because that's sort of part of that process that we have to talk to them. And I got some feedback from that group. And just a reminder, as we move into calendar for January recognition within Hancock County with HCTC, you know, there's 5 days that we have to, we can only be out of sync 5 days. And so as we build the calendar, that's something that's on our mind. And when you see a first draft, sort of remember that as we're looking at it, because then we all look at it at Hancock County level to make sure we're in agreement. School visits, I kind of already sort of talked about, you know, where they're getting around. I did have a budget update. We are awaiting 297 from the state. That's where we get information about our state subsidy. There has been concern that we didn't get a lot of free and reduced applications back. Who knew when you provide free lunch and breakfast that people won't return those, even if you tell them it's for federal reasons and state reasons. And this is a statewide issue, and so some of our schools that rely on economically disadvantaged, that might be an issue, but I brought it up to the assistant commissioner at the last meeting, and they understand it's an issue. The state is potentially looking at different models, but they're nowhere, they haven't made a decision on what that's going to be. So they're aware, and so we'll see what comes down, right, Nancy?
Just waiting.
And as I said, in terms of staffing, I did want to highlight that we have a sub bus driver for the AOS as a whole. There's an individual that we hired to drive our vans, and early on this year talked about, you know, that if they were willing to do the bus driving course and pass, and that we would be able to utilize them on a full-time basis if they were hired through the high school and they passed, and so, you know, they will be utilized so that some of our folks who are custodians in our schools are also not are able to do that job and get a real substitute bus driver for them. And so that would be a good thing. And we also hired another sub driver coming from Ellsworth. They didn't want to drive for that system, and so they're going to sub for us, mostly for trips, but they're willing to do some of our runs as well. So I think that was a good thing. Legislative update. I was just going to share that, you know, what I've heard is that it's going to be a very active session, and which means that there could be some things coming down that will impact us in ways. But every time I meet at that capacity, I just hear the word, it looks like it's going to be an active session. We're going to see what that means. And that's my report. No updates on facilities or anything. That's part of my report.
Any questions?
More of a comment on the job fair. Would we consider switching it to Trenton Elementary School, just where it's a little bit closer to Ellsworth? So we might be able to draw some candidates from the Ellsworth area. Because if you get to Trenton, you're like, there's only 15 more minutes until you hit this school, and another 15 before you hit that one.
We don't want to give Crystal a leg up in any way. And so, no, but that's a good idea. I'll bring that up, because we were thinking of doing it periodically. Doing one that would draw people. And talking to the Ellsworth adult ed and RSU 24. Adult ed folks, because we had our adult ed people put out a notice that, we were doing this, so. That's a little work with you, so.
Okay, that brings us to directors of teaching and learning, who will be doing their December note and the music update. In that, I'm sorry that, not here. He had asked me to put this on the AOS agenda, but we couldn't be part.
You actually queued me up very nicely because the December note does have a big part of our strategic plan for. So job fair is one part, but there's really two other parts, and that's sort of reflected in the note. One is creating a place where people want to work, right, and choose to come and work here. Drive a little bit further to participate in our schools, and so that's something we speak to quite a bit in terms of building a culture of relational trust, and that is a deliberate process of work. It's not something that actually becomes natural for a lot of people, and even ourselves, even myself, we have to work on it, and we are. So that's one component, and the other component is how we're going to address our teacher shortage, like right now, and also our representation in our workforce. We don't have a lot of diversity. So, we keep going with this strategy of advertise nationally, or, put it in the Boston papers, or do this or do that, and people will come here. It's not working. And that's not the right strategy. And it's not the right strategy nationwide. And so Educators Rising is an organization that speaks to this a little bit. And so it's going to kind of bring us onto the national stage a little bit here through this organization. And there's some kind of important contextual information I think that would be helpful for us as board members, leaders in schools to know. First of all, I don't need to read this to you. I'll just give you a second to read this. This is nationwide. So it's not just and then rural areas more so. So people nationwide have been taking the same strategy as us. Just reach out. Well, we're all reaching out to the same people, and they're really right here. So the question is, how are we going to grow our own teachers? Some more information that's important to know. A lot of this is cultural, right? I mean, we are parenting, we're not supporting this profession. Our own teachers sometimes say, I don't think this is the direction you want to go, right? And we need to change that. I mean, that's part of the culture shift that we need to be deliberately working on. This is a beautiful profession, and we need to start acknowledging it such and creating healthy working environments. Next slide. Now, there's been a push to diversify the workforce, and it had gained some ground, but actually we've been losing ground nationally. So you can see here, 2018, 79% of the folks joining the Educators Rising program were students of color, and now it's decreasing. So there is a kind of a national concerted effort to create what's called these Ed Rising chapters, and it's kind of like, we have an early elementary childhood program at HCTC. And that attracts some of our students who are interested in working with preschool age children, but it's not attracting people who will be our future math teachers. And so what we're thinking of doing is gearing up and starting our own chapter here. 33 states have participated in this program. It starts off with like a club and then it can go to a course, and then it can go even to dual enrollment where you get college credit. There's a national organization where kids go to conferences and competitions, and kind of like Skills USA and HCTC, except it's the Ed Rising chapter. So we want to put Maine on the map. Maine's not on the map at all yet, and we want to start it slow and grow it here. Grow our own teachers, so. Not a quick solution, but deliberate solution. And then we invite kids who might never consider becoming teachers. Mostly women. We need more boys in the classroom, for sure. Men. So that's that. Now I'm gonna just transition to music. We have really paid attention to music. We haven't reported out, so I'm glad someone asked about it. We highly prioritized it last year, particularly coming off of COVID, trying to figure out how to grapple with that. So even though we didn't have a lot of PD going, like in terms of float and kind of department specific professional development last year, we did with music. We did several pullouts. Jill Cohen volunteered to be the facilitator, so we could have someone be a deliberate facilitator while the actual music teachers, dug in. And they created a 5-year plan. So it started off, and I didn't link this here because this is really our working document. I guess it's not super polished and presented, but we have a theory of action, right? That's the idea that if we provide all students with a wide variety of consistent experiences to build proficiency and literacy, that's music literacy, then we nurture deep, independent, and personal relationships with music. This is important because studies have shown that the likelihood of engagement decreased with age, yet personal involvement in music from birth to death is of crucial importance to mental, physical, and emotional health. That's our vision. This is what we want to live up to and carry out. On the left-hand side, you can see the current reality, right? That's a list of all the challenges we're facing. And I think they're the challenges we've talked about in this space, so I don't need to read them to you. But then we mapped out, okay, areas of focus that we want to really kind of work through over the next 5 years. And everything in red has to do with scheduling and scheduling issues. Everything in green, which I think is at the bottom here, has to do with resources. And then everything in blue has to do with instruction. So carrying on from last year, we had a common study launch, and Allison Putnam is our common study leader for music. And she's done a phenomenal job taking this work and moving it forward. Last May, they took this and kind of made a plan of attack for this year. Kicking off school with preschool music professional development, which was like an immediate need they wanted some support with. And now they're continuing to use that time that we built into the schedule to work through this 5-year plan. It's complicated. This is a lot of components here that they're trying to sift through and grapple with. And they're all dealing with different resources and constraints. So, but as a team, Allison's doing a great job of bringing them together and working through these as best as they can. We've tried to support them at the district office. We sent 4 people to a national conference in Washington, DC to kind of, get the best information and bring it back. And they'll be sharing that at our common study this Friday. And there's one more thing I want to, and we're going to continue to support them. This is kind of an exciting thing I want to share. Well, that's the national conference. And we're going to continue to support them. I'm kind of giving you a little sneak preview of next year's keynote. So this is Mickey Smith Jr. He's the 2020 Grammy Music Educator Award recipient. He's awesome. He does a lot of motivational speaking, a lot of seeing kids for who they are, seeing them for the sound, and he does PD with music. So he's going to be working with a lot of our teachers on the opening day of school next year, and kind of kicking us off. So he's not exclusive music, but he's heavy music. So that's the music update. You want specific questions? Let her know.
I I'm trying to remember, I know that we've had, there was, so what am I trying to say? High school music teachers and that with the changing and the maneuvering that was going on there, which I think is what was the impetus for us asking for some conversations about music, and you've clearly taken it way beyond conversations about music, which is great.
Okay.
So I guess my question is, what does, I guess it would be great, I don't know if you can do this, but it would be nice to hear a report out about how the new staffing and modeling is going for the high school music, because we were all, you know, there was the big outcry and devastation upon getting that resignation, and a great sigh of relief upon it being retracted.
Yeah.
And that's what really started us really thinking and wondering and wanting to know more to make sure that we could support the program here.
Sure.
So specificity about that would be
Yep.
great to hear about. I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
I know that they are talking about, they had hoped to implement a scenario this year that they couldn't quite find the right matches for, and they're gonna try to do that again for next year. So I can say that. I can also, I am glad I showed this because it doesn't, it doesn't, all this supports this part. So that is what makes this part harder. And I would recommend we put it on the high school agenda for further specific clarity.
That's where it
Yeah.
was.
Oh, my
So-
apologies, yeah.
That's okay.
We've tried it for a long time.
Yeah,
Not getting an AOS. or-
Okay, I get
think
it, yeah.
Part of the challenge is that that part relates to the high school.
Yeah.
But part of the issue that led, part of the impetus that led to the initial resignation was about middle school music and about the unevenness of middle school. And
Correct.
that's becomes an AOS issue, so it's kind of a.
well, I think I spoke to that.
Yeah,
part.
so I think
Yeah,
you
so I
covered
feel
that.
like that part at least supports
Yeah.
that part, but in terms of like, you know,
Who got hired.
staffing and how they want things
Just
to work
as
for
an
next
update,
year.
We didn't hire anyone and the plan was to post it this month or next month.
That's
because
it.
For the next year. That's what Michael decided on, and he was piecemealing instruction. So that's
Yeah.
all we can technically get an update
Yeah,
on.
that's it. Yeah.
But that's helpful to the bigger picture of, so I think that was a big piece of it is that, making sure our K-8 schools are more aligned with everything. Instruction.
I guess I'll need clarity then. Do we have someone in the position or do we not have someone in the position?
Oh, so we have a person in the position, but then we're hiring a second music teacher position,
Okay,
and that position hasn't been filled yet.
okay.
Is that- Yeah.
For the high school.
For the high school, yeah.
Yes. Any other questions? Okay, so is that your complete? Okay, so updates from subcommittee, reorganizations. We recently met and Rob gave us, we kind of narrowed down to a narrow range of sort of organization options for an RSU and a narrow range of funding formula options. So, but ultimately those decisions would be made by an reorganization planning committee. So we're kind of in the phase now of starting to look at assembling that, and we were sort of thinking towards 2024 for when this would potentially go to town meeting votes, because obviously each town has to vote for something, something like this. But a critical piece of this is talking to the community about why we're doing this and why that it's, really for excellent. It's a critical process that we undertake. So we're going to be putting out some op-eds and other things to let the community know, understand more about our reasoning for undertaking this reorganization process and why we really feel like it's in the best interest of the students and why we feel like the time is right now. Those won't get into the how this might look, because that's really for the, we have done a lot of background research, but the ultimate decisions about that will be made by a reorganization planning committee. It'll get into the why of what we're doing. And so I hope by our next meeting, we can have, you'll have seen some of those op-eds, and there will be much more clarity about how we're moving forward with the RPCs. Reorganization planning committee, the other committee members have updates how to add. Can you add to that or Mike?
And I think, you know, the other process, the thing that's sort of driving a lot, you know, it came up at the town council meeting in Bar Harbor, is that relationship between reorganization and, you know, any potential building projects. And so I think we did a really good job that night in talking about the importance of the project in Bar Harbor as needing to happen regardless of whatever happens out of that reorganization, but a recognition that in its design, that the members of the committee and the team from Harriman that's looking at that building has a keen understanding of what possibilities might be as they go through that design process. And so that rooms aren't designed for a particular grade, but for flexibility and can be used in a variety of ways, depending on what potentially, you know, could happen to the organization. So I thought that went really well in terms of the conversation that I had.
And I'll say, like, the timing is hard, but it's also adds rationale behind this process, like all these different building projects are, and trying to coordinate them is illustrative of why we can be providing a better educational experience and more efficient planning, and we can be you know, provisioning special ed and other things more easily and effectively and excellent and with more excellence through in a new structure. Okay. Sorry,
Just one, is that a committee that is volunteer school board members again, or does it need to have a different flavor? Does it have to
The
have?
RPC has to have
Like a
like
certain number?
select board, it has like,
Okay.
you know, the state sets out a
Oh.
matrix who has to be on it, so it has some board members, but it also has all these, it has to. It's like, it has to be, I think, at least like 15, because it has to include certain stakeholders from each town. I wish I had it in front of me, I don't right now, but that's, we don't, we could be involved in the but the, like, the role that they fill is different. So. Yeah,
I think we need to understand that the RP, it's not the school board, and I think this speaks to what we should do as a community school board before we launch the RPC process. Once the RPC happens, they're in charge.
right.
And what that group recommends to the community is what that group recommends to the community. It's not what the school board recommends to the community. And so we do need to be fully engaged in that, and we do need to be prepared to offer concrete, thoughtful proposals.
Right.
And I think that's the effort that we're
Right, that's what we've been
taking at this
doing with
point.
Rob, Levo.
Yeah. So it will be, you probably see people, members of select boards, you probably see members of the community at large, as well as some school board members, so.
What's the timeline for that committee? When do you think that's to be created?
I would imagine that we'll be assembling that, I mean, again, the select board picks the person they're gonna submit to, it, but we would be over, you know, organizing the, putting together that committee this spring.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so discussion items, first reading of revisions to policy JEA compulsory school attendance.
And so that policy was just revisions based on changes in the law, and some clearing up of some language.
It's pretty straightforward, but are there questions about this policy? We will bring it back for, as an action item next time, so if you think of something, you can. Like, or I will work on it, but I think it's fairly straightforward. Okay, action items. First and final reading of revisions to policy IHPA city child time.
And then this is, again, this was just a change in law where they adjusted the age for which the student needs to be, why am I not saying it correctly? For identification, if they need services, and so that age is anyone who is under 22, it was 20. And that's, the major change that they made. And I just want to, one of the things that I identified for the policy committee is child find, oftentimes you think is just kindergarten or sort of pre-K to identify students for IEP services, but child find exists throughout a child's education. So that process is identified that we have an obligation to identify a student who may have needs and be able to try to meet those needs, and that's the idea behind child find.
I move approval. This is actually the first time. Yeah, so I'll move approval of IHBA and child find.
Any discussion? Sorry.
So I thought part of this also involved though with our pre-K, that we were identifying children at ages 4 and even 3.
Well, right now, that is the job of CDS. Not necessarily, our job is for kindergarten, and that might change in the next. Because the legislature has been working on those, that might be the things coming down from that active legislature in terms of how that, what that support is. So this may change again, but right now we're not, but that is the Child and Development Services responsibility.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, moving on to second reading of revisions to policy JICA, weapons, violence, bullying, and school and safety.
We went over this at the last meeting and then made some of the tweaks, so this is sort of the final round of this policy.
And then Gail has been working on, it doesn't really matter for tonight, but
I think
some of the related JIC policies, just to make sure that, and we'll bring those to a future meeting, but one of our efforts has been to make sure that all these related policies, like once they do a bullying or harassment or whatever, that they're aligned in, I mean, in the actual content, but also in their spirit and their sort of, and they all kind of work together and have sufficient class references so that a person can work between them as needed.
So new approval of JICIA, weapons, violence, bullying, and school safety.
So, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, all opposed. Okay. Renewal of contract for superintendent effective 7/1/23.
I move to renew a one-year contract for Mike Sibori starting July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. 152,500.
Second.
Any discussion? All in, did you guys have a question?
Yeah, how can we just do 1 year?
So we do this like this rolling 3-year thing where
Right.
it's like each year we're approving a salary, but I don't know how to describe it there. It rolls forward, so I struggle so hard to understand that we did it, but like it's each year you're redoing it, but it's going forward for 3. You're restarting a new 3-year process. Does that make sense? With the next, with
So
that
we're
year,
just approving the rate for this next.
for this
year.
next year. I don't know if that makes. He is on a 3-year contract, but it's just rolling. So he finished year 1, so now we're rolling it forward another 3 years. I don't know if that. I don't quite understand.
I just
it,
didn't like the sound of just 1 year.
It's a 3-year contract, but we're approving a rate for 1 year, I guess.
Okay,
Slightly different.
I do, yes, I get what you mean.
There you go. Yes, yeah, the 1-year extension. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I knew we were gonna start by the real professional over here somewhere. Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, consideration of approval of fiscal year 24 budget.
So from our last look, we didn't make any changes. Make sure that we have the final agreement. And what's coming around the other way is just being accepted. We just have questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you look like? No. No, I think a lot more. I don't think there's anything new in it.
Just
Oh, yes.
So just as a brief reminder, the budget that Nancy and I and the central office team tried to put together, trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible, and recognizing the need that will be coming out of some of our local schools. And so our budget to budget is at that 4.2 rate, and then the increase in the assessment is 5.53. The increases that happened were within looking at the multilingual learners going from 30 to 50%. You remember from our review the fact that our psychological examiner, we were rolling that into our budget because that was part of some of the grants, and this was the year that we were holding that position in. And then due to the fact that we're going through the reorganization process and moving into the negotiations, that we increased the line of the legal services. And
I move to approve the 23-24 budget, $2,238,139.97.
I should have used that for the 2.5.
Oh,
2.5.
$2,531,456.
Any discussion?
Where's the 2 million five?
On
First
pages.
sorry.
And then on the last, the next to the last.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Approval to set date and time for annual budget meeting and approve and sign warrant for annual budget meeting. So you have it.
I move that the warrant for the AOS 91 budget meeting for the Mount Desert Island Regional School System is hereby approved. The total budget figure of $2,531,456. And then an AOS budget meeting B and is hereby called for January 19th, 2023 for the purpose of voting on the central office budget for the AOS for the 2023-2024 fiscal year.
Second.
Any explanation?
Is there a time?
I think we did 6 o'clock. Leave.
It's not till next year.
There's 2 warrants there too. If we can pass them around, and then I need my secretary to do his duty at the end.
So any more discussions about that? Right, so all in favor of the annual budget meeting? All opposed? Okay, and while these are going around.
Everyone's on the warrant or?
Yes, everyone.
Jessica,
One
but
going one way, one's going.
the annual budget meeting, if any. What if a board has only one representative? Does that matter?
The public budget meeting is the public.
Yeah.
budget.
Okay, so it's okay.
So, yeah.
And the quorum. for
It
the
sounds like
AOS is one
multiple
person.
or however people are gonna be one person somewhere else.
It's just like one person total.
Yeah, because it's just really public.
You gonna be here in January?
Oh, how many people?
January 9th?
I think it's like.
For a long
one.
weekend.
Yeah.
One person can come in.
It's not like.
Maybe Marie will be here.
I'm not, I can't, I have a.
19th, I am
That's the, I'm not just gonna go in there and I got.
Tyson is our mayor. How am I doing? All the rest of us will be here on January 19th.
So other business. we
Annual
will
meeting.
return to the, well, if there's any meeting update, we'll return to that, we'll. see our policy work, our
No.
subcommittee updates.
Yeah, there was a question where we senior acts and graduation standards, and that actually falls under the NEAS process, so we're all gonna, Matt, Jill and I, and we'll present here at the AOS board in January.
And then we'll probably have a calendar.
Yeah.
Share.
Calendar will cover and continued safety fund updates, so. For future agenda items, is there any public comment? No, okay, our next meeting, Monday, 9th January 2022 is our regular meeting, and then Thursday, the 19th is our annual public budget meeting. So these warrants are going around, so while they're doing that, is there a motion to adjourn? Okay.
And the meeting that was scheduled for Thursday of this week is not happening.
That is not happening. Please handle that.
Just did it.
There's the warrant.
What's it?
I was going to study.
There. It's the first two votes.
Yeah, we already.
Right.
Okay.
I wanted to-